subscribers and dear students. Welcome to yet another video on Offbeat Gyan. This particular video is on the basis of a request by one of my students. She wanted a video on Shakespeare's play Othello, and so here I am with a brief overview of Othello. I tried to make it as brief as possible, but the story is so interesting and the plot is so convoluted, and the motives and machinations of human beings. It is a very complex play, and if I leave out too much of it, I wouldn't be doing justice to the play. So I have tried to keep it brief, but it is not that brief. And I hope you will enjoy listening to this long monologue by me on Offbeat Gyan. So here goes Othello. Othello is Shakespeare's famous tragedy, which was first performed in 1604. It is a play about racial prejudice and jealousy. It is a play that develops on the tragic flaw in Othello's personality, his bad judgment, his jealousy, deep insecurity, and his inferiority complex. Who is Othello? Othello is the general of the Venetian army. He is a Moorish man. Moorish meaning dark-skinned, and Moor was a term used by Christian Europeans to refer to the Muslim population belonging to the region which was known as the Iberian Peninsula, that is parts of Spain and Portugal, and they used the term Moor to refer to Arabs also. Now Othello is a Christian Moor. He is dark-skinned and he is middle-aged. He has had a remarkable life. He has traveled to exotic lands. He has faced many ups and downs in his life. And seeing his brilliant military career, the Duke of Venice had made him the commander of the Venetian army in its war against the invading Ottoman Turks. The next important character is, of course, Desdemona. So who is Desdemona? She is the beautiful, elegant, loyal, devoted and tragic heroine of Shakespeare's Othello. She is the daughter of the highly respected Venetian senator Brabantio. When the play begins, she has already eloped with Othello and secretly married him. In the Venetian court, there is prejudice against Othello because of his dark complexion, because of his Moorish blood, and they are very, very outraged that this Venetian beauty has eloped with such a man, with Othello. She openly proclaims her love for Othello to all the people assembled in the Duke's court. Her father is unhappy, but eventually he accepts the decision of his daughter. The next important character, probably the most important character after Othello, is Iago. Iago is a Machiavellian character. He is mean. He is manipulative. He is 28 years old and he is Othello's ensign or standard bearer, the lowest position in the army. He deeply dislikes Othello for favoring Cassio to become the lieutenant instead of him. Now, Cassio has very limited or no experience in military affairs and warfare, but Othello has made him the lieutenant, and this is something that vexes Iago. He is a character who manages to convince everybody around him that he has their best intentions at heart. All the while, he is plotting and planning about creating problems and obstacles for them, leading to their downfall. He is extremely mean, extremely selfish, and nobody really understands why he hates Othello so much. The reasons that he gives are not really very convincing. He discovers people's weaknesses and then he preys upon them. Every human being has certain vulnerabilities, so he is somebody who catches hold of those vulnerabilities and he capitalizes them. Iago is an expert at doing this. He keeps on feeding Othello's jealousy by telling him all these stories about affair between Desdemona and Cassio. And in the process, he destroys the lives of Othello and Desdemona. Now, coming to the story of Othello. The play begins on a street in Venice, and as I told you earlier, when the play begins, Desdemona has already eloped with Othello and secretly married him. The play is set in the latter half of the 16th century when Venice was at war with the Ottoman Turkish Empire. Rodrigo, a rich and useless young man, aspires to marry the beautiful Desdemona. He assumes that he will succeed in his mission to marry Desdemona if he takes the help of the unscrupulous Iago. With this purpose in mind, he often gives money to Iago, and Iago has sort of convinced him that if Rodrigo keeps on paying him money, then Iago will make the alliance between Rodrigo and Desdemona possible. But now Rodrigo has come to learn that Desdemona has already eloped and she has secretly married Othello. So he is extremely disappointed and enraged. And he comes and confronts Iago. And he tells him that he feels betrayed, he feels cheated. Iago, who is Othello's ensign, very coolly, very confidently, he assures Rodrigo that he hates Othello because Michael Cassio had become Othello's lieutenant instead of him. So Iago's manipulative mind begins working. He tells Rodrigo that they should go and inform Brabantio about Desdemona's elopement and secret marriage to Othello. So both of them, they immediately leave the place and they go and stand on the street in front of Brabantio's house. Brabantio, as I told you earlier, he is a Venetian senator. He is a highly respected man. And Iago and Rodrigo, they go and stand outside the street of Brabantio's house and they start shouting in extremely vulgar language about Desdemona's elopement. Brabantio hears the commotion and he comes out. And when he hears the words that are being used to refer to Desdemona and Othello, he is very shocked and he does not realize that his daughter has left the place. So he sends his men to search the place and he comes to know that actually indeed Desdemona is missing. So he is enraged and he is very, very determined to get his daughter back. So Iago has plotted the scene so far and Iago finds that things have developed as he expected. So he leaves Rodrigo and he goes off to meet Othello. The enraged Brabantio then prepares to go to Othello's house and confront Othello along with Rodrigo. Now Othello and Brabantio, both of them do not know about Iago's schemes and plots. Iago goes to meet Othello at his house and Iago spins an elaborate web of deceit and treachery. He goes and tells Othello that Desdemona's father, Brabantio, is coming there to establish a divorce between Othello and Desdemona. He will force a divorce between Othello and Desdemona. So Iago tells Othello that Othello must go inside the house. Othello refuses to do so. He is an upright, honest, sincere man, and a very brave man, a remarkable man who has had a very colorful, adventurous life filled with misfortune, downfall, and great victories, great military exploits. So he is very determined that he is not going to go and hide inside the house. He says that he is prepared to stand there and confront Brabantio when Brabantio comes there. And Iago and Othello are standing there when they see a group of men approaching Othello's house. Iago expects that it would be Brabantio and Rodrigo, but it is actually Michael Cassio and some men who have come from the Duke of Venice court. So Michael Cassio comes there and he informs Othello that the Duke of Venice has summoned Othello to the court. He is supposed to go there immediately because the Duke wants to discuss the impending Ottoman-Turkish attack on the island of Cyprus, which is under Venetian control. So while they are standing there and talking, Iago also informs Cassio that Othello is married, that he is married Desdemona. And at this point of time, very visibly agitated Rodrigo, Brabantio, and a couple of other men, they come there and they confront Othello. The situation becomes very, very tumultuous. A confrontation is about to break out between Othello's men, between Othello's men and Brabantio's men. Othello very calmly and coolly commands the assembled men to hold their horses. He tells them to remain in control. He tells them that he has been summoned by the Duke to appear in the court. So Brabantio immediately says that he will also follow Othello to the Duke's court and he will go and make his complaint about Othello to the Duke. So all of them, Iago, Cassio, Brabantio, Othello, Rodrigo, all of them, they arrive at the Duke's court. In the court, the Duke and his courtiers, they are discussing the Turkish invasion. And it is at this juncture that Othello and all the other men, they arrive in the court. And Brabantio, he is very agitated, he is very disturbed. So he immediately says that all proceedings, all discussion about the invasion should be deferred until the Duke hears his complaint about Othello. And Brabantio accuses Othello of having used black magic and potions in order to attract or lure Desdemona and secretly marry her. But the Duke is unconvinced by Brabantio's words because the man in question is somebody of the stature of Othello. Othello admits that he had married Desdemona, but he refutes Brabantio's allegations that he had used magic and charms and potions to lure Desdemona to marry him. Othello reveals that he was often invited to Brabantio's house because Brabantio wanted to learn more and more about the adventurous and remarkable life of Othello. He wanted to hear about the military exploits, the ups and downs that Othello had suffered in his life. So Othello was a regular visitor at Brabantio's house and he used to regale Brabantio with these adventures, his exploits and his experiences in faraway exotic lands. Now some of these stories were also overheard by Desdemona. So once in a while she would ask him to repeat these stories to her. So she fell in love with his stories. She fell in love with his remarkable life and she wanted to marry him. At this point of time, Desdemona enters the court of the Duke of Venice and she also confesses that she had fallen in love with Othello and she had got married to him of her own free will. Brabantio accepts the situation and he wishes well to the married couple, and then the discussion goes back to the impending Ottoman Turkish invasion. Now, Othello is ordered by the Duke of Venice to leave for Cyprus and prepare for the war against the Turkish invaders. And Othello says that arrangements must be made for Desdemona also, because she will be traveling with him. And despite everyone dissuading them from doing so, Othello and Desdemona prepare to embark on their journey to Cyprus. So now only Iago and Rodrigo are left on the stage. And Rodrigo is angry. He is agitated. He feels let down. He feels completely betrayed. So Iago calms him down and tells him that Rodrigo must go along with them to Cyprus. And once they get there, Iago will make sure that Rodrigo gets Desdemona. Rodrigo also leaves the scene, and then Iago reveals his further plans in a soliloquy. So let us see what his further plans are. Now, Iago's evil genius is at work, and he plans to fool Rodrigo, but only after getting more money from him. Then he also reveals his suspicion that Othello had at some point of time slept with his wife Emilia. Iago is married to Emilia, and Iago has a doubt that Othello had slept with his wife Emilia. So he wants to take revenge for that by sleeping with Desdemona. And he says that if that doesn't happen, if revenge in that manner is not possible, then what he is going to do is he is going to fill all sorts of nonsense about Desdemona and Cassio having an affair into Othello's head. He is going to tell Othello that Cassio and Desdemona are having an affair, and this will create turmoil in Othello's mind. Iago's motives are never very clear, but he loves to play with people's hearts and souls. He is an evil genius, and he indulges in evil for the sake of evil. He is somebody who delights in evil. Now, the scene moves from Venice to Cyprus, the island of Cyprus, where we have Montano, the Venetian governor of Cyprus, waiting at the port. He is looking at the sea. There is a furious storm that is raging on the sea. The sea is tumultuous, and the sight is terrifying. And he wonders if the Turkish fleet would be able to make this journey. Soon what happens? Ships carrying Iago, Cassio, Rodrigo, Desdemona and Emilia, they arrive at Cyprus. Othello hasn't come so far. And Cassio tells Montano that on their journey to Cyprus, they had seen the Turkish fleet thrown asunder by the terrifying stormy seas. So, the imminent Turkish invasion, the threat of the imminent Turkish invasion is gone. Now, it is no longer going to happen. Now, they are waiting for Othello to arrive safely. While they are waiting for Othello, Cassio and Desdemona, they start making fun of Emilia, saying that she is very talkative and she's a chatterbox. So Iago takes this opportunity to berate all women. He rails against women, and Desdemona listens to that. And after that, what happens? Cassio takes Desdemona away from the group, and he wants to discuss something about Othello's arrival. And while he is talking to Desdemona, he holds her hand. So this particular moment where Cassio holds Desdemona's hand is witnessed by Iago, and he stores it up in his brain for future use. So he already has a plot in mind for trapping Cassio and Desdemona, and when he sees this sight, he stores it up as future evidence. Then everybody leaves the place. Iago is left alone, and he delivers another soliloquy where he tells us that he is going to create these rumors about Cassio and Desdemona having an affair, and he will drive Othello to madness, and thus he will get his revenge. Next, we have Othello arriving safely and greeting Desdemona very warmly. And then Iago is ordered to unload, unload the ship. So everybody goes off to the castle to celebrate the defeat of the Turkish fleet by nature. And Iago and an unhappy Rodrigo, they stay behind. So Iago says to Rodrigo that soon Desdemona will become tired of Othello because of his age and his dark skin. And then her attention will move to Cassio. And he tells Rodrigo about having seen Cassio holding Desdemona's hand. Rodrigo is unconvinced and he tells Iago that it was probably a friendly discussion that they were having and there is no hidden motive in Cassio talking to Desdemona or holding her hand. But Iago's will prevails and Iago tells Rodrigo that he has to confront Cassio and actually manufacture a quarrel with Cassio. When he does that, Cassio will get into the bad books of Othello and thus Cassio will slip out of favor with Othello. Then the night of revelry. They are celebrating the victory of the Venetian fleet against the Turkish fleet. They didn't even have to fight a battle and nature had taken care of the imminent Turkish invasion. And Othello, he meets Cassio. He tells Cassio that Cassio is on guard that night and he must practice self-restraint. And then he goes off to be with Desdemona. After Othello's departure from the scene, Iago arrives. And as soon as Iago arrives, he starts persuading Cassio to get drunk. So Cassio tells him that he does not wish to drink, but Iago continues to talk to him persuasively and Cassio leaves the place. After some time, he returns and he is drunk. He comes along with Montano and then Montano and Iago are talking to each other when Cassio goes off again. And Iago takes this opportunity to tell Montano that Cassio is a good soldier but he has a drinking problem. He cannot control his lust for alcohol. And Montano says that this is something that must be informed to Othello immediately. Soon Rodrigo enters and Rodrigo and Cassio enter into an argument, and this particular argument has been instigated by Iago earlier on. Iago had earlier told Rodrigo that he must confront Cassio and start an argument. They must quarrel, and when this quarrel goes out of control, then it will reflect badly upon Cassio. And the quarrel actually turns into a fight and Montano tries to prevent Cassio from attacking Rodrigo and he is stabbed in the process. So Iago sends away Rodrigo, telling him to inform everyone about the fight. The alarm bells start ringing and Othello arrives with armed guards. And Othello immediately demands an explanation from the wounded Montano, Iago and Cassio. Montano is wounded, so he asks Iago to give the explanation, and Cassio, he is actually very shocked. He doesn't know how the attack occurred, how he got into a fight. He doesn't know how it all happened. So Iago very convincingly gives an explanation where he gives the impression to Othello that he is actually trying to protect Cassio and diminish the guilt on the part of Cassio. But in the process, he also manages to convince Othello that the whole problem has been created by Cassio and his drinking problem. Immediately, Othello strips Cassio of his lieutenantship or lieutenancy, and Cassio is humiliated and disgruntled. So, Iago has succeeded in his plan. Cassio is humiliated. He is very worried about his position. Subtly and cleverly, Iago convinces him to approach Desdemona. He tells Cassio that Cassio must go and meet Desdemona and ask Desdemona to talk to Othello on behalf of Cassio. Iago convinces Cassio that if he approaches Desdemona, then she will appeal to Othello and Cassio will get back his post of lieutenant. So Cassio leaves and Iago is very happy that the trap that he had laid for Cassio has actually managed to rob Cassio of his lieutenancy. Then Cassio approaches Desdemona and talks to her. And Iago also has another plan afoot. When he tells Cassio to go and meet Desdemona and appeal for himself, he is also planning to use this as a point to prove that Cassio and Desdemona are having an affair. So a very angry and upset Rodrigo enters and Iago convinces him to stay back in Cyprus. Rodrigo also leaves and Iago is again left alone, and he tells us that he will now ask Emilia to speak to Desdemona for Cassio. Then he will find a way to show Othello that Cassio is trying to get Desdemona's attention and that they are having a torrid affair. So then what happens? In the next scene we have Cassio approaching Desdemona and Iago is also there, and Iago tells him that he will find a way to take away Othello from the scene so that Cassio and Desdemona can talk in private. Cassio manages to meet Desdemona. While they are talking, at that point of time, Othello and Iago enter the chamber. And as soon as Cassio sees Othello entering the chamber, he moves out. He goes away from the room, and Othello sees this. And Othello is disturbed when he sees Cassio slinking out of the room. And Iago immediately says that it couldn't be Cassio because Cassio wouldn't do something like that. Iago's words are veiled, but they do the necessary harm. They create the necessary doubt and suspicion in Othello's mind that it was definitely Cassio, and Cassio had been doing something that he shouldn't have done. That is why as soon as Othello came into the room, Cassio was going away. He was slinking away from the room. Iago has these noble intentions, but those noble intentions actually hide a mind of dangerous power, dangerous evil. He has huge capacity for evil. So after this, what happens is Desdemona pleads on Cassio's behalf, and he does not agree immediately because he is not convinced by Desdemona's reasoning. He says that he needs time to arrive at a decision. Everyone leaves the room, everyone leaves the chamber, and Iago sets to work. He starts filling Othello's mind with poison. He tells Othello that Desdemona and Cassio are having a secret affair. Cassio had been the go-between between Othello and Desdemona during the days of their courtship, before their marriage. And Iago creates the impression that Desdemona and Cassio are having a hot and passionate affair. And Othello, on hearing all this, is tormented, he is disturbed, he is in a dilemma. He is an upright and honest man, and when he hears all these things about his wife and his former lieutenant, he is extremely disturbed. Then, while he is in the chamber, Desdemona and Emilia, they arrive to call Othello for dinner. Othello, he is angry and he is visibly upset. So he says that he has a headache. And Desdemona is immediately concerned, and she comes near him and she tries to bind a handkerchief on his forehead. But Othello rebukes her, saying that it's a small handkerchief, and he does it very, very sharply. So Desdemona drops the handkerchief on the floor and she leaves the room. And Emilia picks up the handkerchief. And she says to herself that Iago had told her umpteen times to steal this particular handkerchief. Now she would give him a surprise. And she goes and gives this handkerchief to Iago, and Iago is very, very delighted. He moves with the next step in his elaborate Machiavellian plot. He decides that he is going to plant this particular handkerchief in Cassio's room. And Othello enters the room and he confronts Iago. He appears to be very, very disturbed. He demands proof from Iago about Desdemona being a whore. Iago says that he will provide the necessary evidence. And Desdemona searches for her handkerchief, and Othello enters the chamber. He asks her to produce the handkerchief. He tells Desdemona that that particular handkerchief had been given to him by his mother on her deathbed. When she was dying at that point of time, she had given the handkerchief to her son. And he tells the story of this handkerchief to Desdemona. He says that this particular handkerchief had been given to Othello's mother by a woman magician. And she had told Othello's mother that as long as the handkerchief was in her hands, her husband would remain loyal to her. If she lost the handkerchief, then her husband would abandon her. On hearing this, Desdemona becomes even further agitated and she starts hunting for the handkerchief. But she is not able to find it because, as we know, she had left the handkerchief on the floor when Othello had shouted at her, and Emilia had picked it up and Emilia had immediately given it to her husband Iago. So Desdemona says that she has the handkerchief but not with her at that particular moment. Othello is not convinced and he starts rebuking her. Before this, what happens is when she sees her husband agitated, Desdemona tries to appeal on Cassio's behalf. This only adds fuel to the fire. Othello becomes even more angry and he leaves the room. Then Iago, Cassio and Emilia arrive in the room, and Desdemona tells Cassio that his timing is wrong because he has arrived at a time when Othello is disturbed. She tells him that Othello is disturbed about matters of state, and she asks Cassio to wait for some time before she approaches Othello once again on behalf of Cassio. Meanwhile, Cassio is waiting, and Bianca, a prostitute, comes there. Bianca and Cassio used to meet each other frequently, and Bianca comes there and she starts shouting at Cassio because Cassio has not been going to visit her. And she demands a promise from Cassio that he will be meeting her that night. So Cassio promises her that he will be going to the brothel, he will be meeting her that night and they would be together. Othello then calls Emilia and he asks her about Desdemona's behavior, and Emilia strongly defends Desdemona. He asks her to bring Desdemona back to the room, and when when Emilia goes to call Desdemona, Othello calls Emilia a female pimp. And Desdemona comes. He bids Emilia to guard the door. He confronts Desdemona with his half-formed impressions. She refutes all his allegations. Okay. Othello at this point of time is completely controlled by his jealousy, by his rage, his inferiority, his feelings of deep insecurity. Because of his age, because of the color of his skin, and all these things are going on through his mind. And they are spiced up by the stories of the amorous relationship between Cassio and Desdemona, the stories which were told to him by Iago. And he calls Desdemona a whore. Emilia comes inside and she comforts a shocked and upset Desdemona. Then Desdemona asks Emilia to bring Iago to her. She asks Iago about Othello's strange and uncharacteristic behavior. Emilia points out that somebody has been telling all these false stories about Desdemona and Emilia. Somebody had filled Iago's mind with suspicions regarding an affair going on between Othello and Emilia, and that somebody had also created suspicion in the mind of Othello by telling the story of an affair between Desdemona and Cassio. Iago is very, very sincere. He placates Desdemona with false sincerity, saying that it is matters of state which are troubling Othello, and that was the reason for his outburst against Desdemona. Iago keeps on poisoning Othello's mind against Cassio and Desdemona. He makes the gravest accusations against them. He tells Othello about the amorous escapades that have taken place, all false. But he convinces Othello, and Othello is raging within himself. And Othello demands proof for all the stories that Iago is telling. And Iago says that he will provide convincing proof of the sexual encounters between Desdemona and Cassio. A deeply disturbed Othello falls down on hearing this. He's so disturbed, he falls down, and at that point of time, Cassio makes an entry. And when Cassio makes an entry, Iago tells him that Othello is having one of his epileptic fits. And he also tells Cassio that he would like to speak to Cassio in private when Othello is not there. So Cassio leaves the place and Othello comes out of his trance. Then Iago tells Othello to hide himself and watch the conversation which is going to take place between him and Cassio. So Othello hides himself and Cassio comes back. Very cleverly, Iago makes Cassio talk about his sexual escapades with Bianca. Cassio says that he will now not go back to Bianca, and at that moment, Bianca comes with Desdemona's handkerchief. When Bianca and Cassio leave the place, Othello comes out very agitated, angry, and disturbed. And he is now convinced that Cassio and Desdemona have been cheating him. Othello plans to kill Cassio, but he cannot accept that his beautiful, loving wife Desdemona has been betraying him. Iago goads him. Iago tells him that he must strangle Desdemona on their marital bed for cheating him. And Iago says that he will take care of Cassio. After some time, Desdemona arrives with another Venetian, Lodovico. And Lodovico has come with a message from the Duke of Venice. He has come with the message that Othello has been recalled to Venice and that the island of Cyprus should now be left in charge of Cassio. So Desdemona is very happy on hearing that she can go back to Venice, and on seeing her visible joy, Othello becomes even more angry with her, and Othello slaps her. Lodovico, on seeing this, is shocked. He is shocked to see the usually calm and controlled Othello lashing out at his beautiful young wife Desdemona. And Lodovico, he asks Desdemona to be summoned back. Desdemona has left the room. So Lodovico asks Othello to call back Desdemona. But Othello refuses to do that and he rails against Desdemona. And Lodovico, on seeing this outburst, wonders if Othello is mad. Iago refuses to answer his queries and tells him that Lodovico must find the truth for himself. Then what happens? There is a conversation between the angry Rodrigo and Iago, and Iago lies to Rodrigo. Iago tells the foolish Rodrigo, that Othello is being sent to Mauritania in Africa and that Cassio is now in charge of Cyprus. So, Othello has actually been asked to go back to Venice, but Iago tells Rodrigo that Othello has been asked to go to Mauritania. And Iago says that Rodrigo must do something about Cassio or he will lose Desdemona forever. And then Iago very cleverly takes Rodrigo to the brothel where Cassio has gone to meet Bianca. He is given a rapier or a sword. Rodrigo is given a rapier or a sword by Iago, and Iago tells him that as soon as Cassio comes out of the brothel, Rodrigo must attack him. Rodrigo is actually scared to be there alone. He wants Iago to be with him, but Iago leaves the place. After some time, Cassio comes out of the brothel and Rodrigo attacks him. But Rodrigo fails to wound Cassio and Cassio attacks Rodrigo. In the ensuing confusion, Iago darts out and he stabs Cassio on the leg and he quickly disappears from the scene. Cassio cries out in pain, and Othello, who is there at that point of time, he hears Cassio crying out and he assumes that Cassio has been killed by Iago. And Othello returns to his chambers to kill Desdemona for betraying him. He believes that Iago has managed to kill Cassio and now he must take revenge for the betrayal by murdering Desdemona. On hearing the commotion outside the brothel, Lodovico and Graziano come running. But they are unable to see or understand anything clearly because it is very dark. And Iago is the only one who knows what is happening. He acts like a puppeteer. And he comes out of hiding and he pretends as if he is seeing Cassio for the first time. Cassio asks for his help and Iago unhesitatingly, cold-bloodedly stabs Rodrigo. Lodovico and Graziano are there, but they are not aware of the strange turn of events. And after Rodrigo has been murdered by Iago, Lodovico, Graziano and Iago meet each other. They come face to face with each other. And they are unaware of Iago's heinous and murderous activities. Meanwhile, Bianca comes out and she cries out when she sees the wounded Cassio. And Cassio has no idea as to who has attacked him. Iago convinces everybody that it was Rodrigo and that justifies his killing of Rodrigo. Cassio says that he did not even know Rodrigo. Anyway, Cassio and Rodrigo's body are taken away from the place and Iago proceeds to give a lecture on morality to Bianca and he arrests her. Emilia, who comes there, is sent to inform Othello and Desdemona about what has happened, about the activities that have taken place outside the brothel. And Othello, meanwhile, he has arrived in his bedchamber where he finds Desdemona sleeping on the bed. He holds a candle and he looks at the sleeping Desdemona. He is getting ready to kill her, but then he pauses to give her one last kiss. She wakes up and he tells her that he is going to kill her. A shocked Desdemona asks her husband the reason and he tells her that she has betrayed him by having a relationship with Cassio. Desdemona vehemently refutes his accusation, but he refuses to believe her. He asks her about the handkerchief, which he had given her and tells her that it was with Cassio. He tells her that Cassio had confessed, but he will not say anything anymore because he has been killed by Iago. On hearing this, Desdemona cries out. She is shocked and she starts crying. Enraged, Othello throws himself at her and despite her pleas to be allowed to prey before he kills her, she is smothered by him. Emilia calls out from outside, and Othello assumes that it is his wife who is crying out, so he smothers her again. Then Othello draws the curtains around the bed and he allows Emilia to come into the room. She informs him that Cassio had killed Rodrigo. It was actually Iago who had killed Rodrigo, but Iago had told Emilia to tell Othello that Cassio had killed Rodrigo. Othello wants to know if Cassio has been killed, and Emilia tells him that Cassio was alive. And Othello realizes that his plans have gone haywire. Meanwhile, Desdemona, who is still barely alive, cries out that she has been murdered. Then she retracts her statement. She says that she has killed herself and she dies. Othello reveals that he had killed his wife for cheating him. He tells her that Iago had revealed Desdemona's betrayal to him. Emilia tells him that Desdemona had been pure of heart and she had deeply loved Othello. But Othello refuses to believe her, and Emilia cries out for help. On hearing her cries, Iago, Montano, and Graciano rush into the bedchamber. Iago's perfidy and treachery are gradually revealed through his wife Emilia's words. Othello refuses to believe in his wife's innocence, and he still trusts Iago. He falls onto the bed at the dead Desdemona's feet. Graciano reveals that it is good that Brabantio has died before learning of his daughter's cruel fate. Emilia reveals that it was she who had handed over Desdemona's handkerchief to Iago because Iago had persistently asked her to give it to him, to steal it and give it to him. Iago realizes that all his plots and schemes will be unraveled soon by his wife's revelations, so he tries to kill Emilia, but he is prevented by Graciano. Othello tries to stab Iago, but he is prevented by Montano. In the ensuing confusion, Iago quickly manages to stab Emilia and he runs out of the bedchamber, chased by Montano and Graciano. Othello is shocked. He is tormented by guilt. He is tormented by the fact that he had shown very poor judgment in misjudging his wife's sincerity and love for him. He looks for a weapon to kill himself, and meanwhile the dying Emilia keeps on telling him that Desdemona had been a faithful and devoted wife. Iago is caught and brought back to the bedchamber. Montano, Lodovico, Cassio, and Graciano find an armed Othello remorseful about having killed his wife Desdemona. Othello rushes at Iago and stabs him, but he manages to only wound him. And Iago sneers at him that you have only wounded me, not killed me. Iago refuses to talk about his planning, about the evil schemes that he had concocted. But Lodovico, after having disarmed Othello, reveals that a letter had been found in Rodrigo's pocket, revealing the true state of affairs. Othello questions Cassio about the kerchief, and he says that he had found it in his chamber. Lodovico asks Othello to return with them to Venice, where he will be stripped of his powers and he will be put on trial. Othello immediately pulls out a third dagger and he kills himself. He falls dead upon the bed with Desdemona's body. Graciano is appointed Othello's heir by Lodovico, and he tells Montano that Montano will be in charge of executing Iago. Lodovico leaves to prepare for the journey to Venice and inform the Duke and the Senate about the events in Cyprus. This is how one of Shakespeare's greatest tragedies concludes, with the death of Othello and Desdemona. I will wind up by talking about the tragic or fatal flaw or hamartia, which we find in Shakespeare's greatest tragedies. His four great tragedies are, of course, King Lear, Macbeth, Othello, and Hamlet. And the tragic flaw is actually a major weakness or a deficiency in the hero's personality, which eventually leads to the hero's tragic fall from grace and death. King Lear's tragic flaw is his unbridled arrogance and his pride. Macbeth's tragic flaw is his uncontrolled desire for power, his ambition, which is blind. Hamlet is indecisive. He is unable to take decisions immediately. And Othello's tragic flaw is his inferiority, his deep insecurity, his bad judgment, and his jealousy. So, with this, I conclude this video on Othello, a brief overview. I hope it helps you all to have a better understanding of this great play. And thank you for listening patiently. I hope you will subscribe to Offbeat Gyan. Thank you.